Hold on, I just got it yet. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Hola.
¿Cómo estás?
Bien.
Good afternoon, all.
Hola. We'll start in a couple minutes, just giving our colleagues a couple more minutes to log on.
Good evening, all.
Hi, Sha.
Good evening, Sherry.
Good night.
Okay. How is everybody doing today?
I'm good.
Good.
Doing
okay.
Doing well.
Great. So let's start. I guess the others will join us. It's normally more than this by now, but we can start. So there are a couple of things that a couple of things that I want to talk about, housekeeping matters for the class before we get started in the lesson. So this week we're supposed to finish chapter 1. Next week we're supposed to be discussing the questions, which obviously is the first assignment for this cohort. On the 18th, we're supposed to go to chapter 2. And on the 25th, we're supposed to do chapter 3. So here's my dilemma. My birthday is the day before the 18th, and I will be off of the island. And where I'm going, I'm not sure if I'm going to have stable internet connection for that period. So I am going to suggest and ask, actually, if it's okay for us to actually next week do chapter 2, and on the 18th we can slot in the week to do the review for the assignment. That way, if I don't have stable internet, it won't be any big deal. And then on the 25th, I will definitely be off the island, and we can do chapter 3 then. I intend to have full connectivity that week. So
I just trying to understand what you said. I know your birthday's the 17th. When are you traveling?
both of those, the last 2 weeks of this class, I'm not going to be here. The 18th, my connectivity is going to be limited.
So I just trying to figure out, I just trying to figure out when we'll be able to make up the 18th class.
No, the 18th we're going to have a class, but what I'm saying is that is if we can put the assignment, because on the 11th is when we're supposed to have that class, that entire session is just dedicated to the assignment. So if we can make the 18th that day, normally we don't spend more than half an hour, 45 minutes when we discuss the assignments. We just discuss it and then get on to it, get on with it. So we can make it the 18th, I'd be grateful. And then on the 25th, we can go back and just do chapter 3. We can, Nelly, we can do what we normally do. You know, have
I'll send it out in the group.
Yeah.
That works for me, Miss Sands.
Works for me as well.
That works for me, Ms. Sands.
Everybody's cool with that? That's only 3 people.
Yes, that's good.
Good for me.
That
Fine with me.
actually works out better because at least we can cover 2 chapters before we discuss the assignment.
Agreed.
Agreed. I agree.
Agreed, indeed.
So everybody's good? Anybody with an objection, let me know.
I think everybody on here agree. It'll just be those persons who I don't see on here that we probably have to confer with.
Right. Well, I mean, this is the majority of the class. So if the majority agrees, then the majority will carry.
Okay.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now that that's out of the way, thank you guys very much for accommodating me. I have not heard anybody say anything about extensions, so I'm not sure if an extension has been extended as yet. So I would suggest that we keep the 7th as the deadline that we're working towards. Yes?
Well, I was just gonna ask the group if anybody inquired about it or if they saw anything pop up, because I haven't seen anything, but I'm just asking if.
I didn't check because I was waiting to see a notice. I know they had sent out to say that they were doing some updates to the site and we won't be able to get on, and then they will send a notification when you do have the ability to get on the site. So I was actually waiting to see when they would send, because I think they were changing platforms or something like that. And so it
Right.
said you won't have access to the site. So I was just waiting to see that.
All right. Okay. Well, I checked this afternoon and I didn't see anything. Yes, yet.
So that means you were able to log in with your credentials then?
Yes, they're allowing you in. You just have to go to take another route. They have something on the side, and you can still use your credentials. Until they say they will let us know when they're actually updating the site.
Yeah, that's what I had said. So I said I was waiting for them to send that. So that's why I didn't bother to go on, because I figured we wouldn't have had access.
But trust me, I definitely was checking. Ain't nothing there.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so we have to work towards the date. And don't assume that you're going to get an extension.
Yes, I can confirm that. I just looked while we were talking and there is no option for an extension.
Okay, which gives us 5 weeks to get all of this done. So this is one of those times you really have to push. You don't have the leisure of having an additional 2 weeks, yes?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
I'm hoping that you guys finished chapter 1, the reading, and that you would have looked at the appendix, which is very important to your paper.
I have to
Did
step
everybody
away.
get pardon?
I'm saying I have to step away. I'm coming right back.
Okay, did everybody have an opportunity to finish chapter 1 and look at the appendix? Don't all just speak at once, people. Nobody finished reading chapter 1?
Ms. Sands, I completed chapter 1 and was able to go through the appendix.
Anybody else?
Yes, I completed chapter 1.
Did you go through the appendix, Siobhan?
Yes, I did.
Okay. That's 2 out of 12. Well, 2 out of 10. Nobody else? So y'all gonna be rushing at the end in the next couple of weeks to try and get all this crammed in. That's the plan?
I wouldn't say it's a plan. It's a bit of a last resort at this point.
Way to go, Shari.
No, I'm not happy about this. I'm just, that was not the plan.
Remember, we went over the questions last week. This isn't one of those papers where you can slunk. I think we discovered that last week, right? You see how much is is being required?
Yes.
Right, which means it's extra effort. I know we're all busy. I know we have a lot going on, all of us do, but you really have to push because you do not have the time that you would have had in previous assignments. And this is not one of those, even though the questions are broken down, the expectation is different. I think we talked about that last week in class. So I'm gonna need y'all to do the reading, because how are we going to have discussions? I'm not gonna sit here and read, that's not how we operate in this class. We need to be able to discuss. And chapter 1, 2, and 3, obviously, is what's going to make up your assignment, right? So for the 2 people that read, 3 people, if it's 3, please inform, assist your classmates on what the balance of chapter 1 is about. And then we definitely have to go through the appendix, because the appendix is something that you can use in your assignment as your material to draw information from, in addition to the central bank and SEB guidelines. So who wants to give a go at the balance of chapter 6 out of those 2 or 3 people that actually read it? Shari Nixon.
Oh, I know it was any minute now. Yes, ma'am.
You should know it's coming for you. What happened while you
I
were reading?
know. Well,
What had happened was what?
what happened was my birthday is tomorrow, and I kind of get distracted. It's I can finish reading it before next class for sure with chapter 2.
Okay, you was distracted. All right, you get away because you was a November one. You get away. I can let you. I give you a blind because mine coming up too. But don't try this next week, eh?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
All right.
Miss Sands, you took the words out of my mouth. I was like, this is awesome. All of us November people.
Yay.
That's Shari.
Mark,
That's the next.
Shari.
Yeah.
Shari, you in November too?
Yep, November 13th. Woohoo.
Woohoo! Way to go! Way to go! The rest of y'all don't get jealous, okay? Just calm down. We good. We good. Okay, so that only leaves Siobhan and Chanel. Which one of y'all? Okay, so both of you guys can assist. Nelly taking a break, so I think Nelly may have read the next Nelly. But y'all two, let's kick the discussion off, please. Siobhan or the next Chanel.
I'll let Chanel get started.
Siobhan,
Okay,
you think you're sick?
My girl, that's my girl, but I could take that. Ms. Sands, where had we stopped so I could know where to
6.
start?
We're starting from 6 this week.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back.
Nelly, you read chapter 1. You finished reading chapter 1?
No, I finished.
And I write here vouching for you. Go to the back of the class, man.
I lied to you.
Yeah, but that don't make me feel no better. Gosh. Anyway, Chanel is going to brief us on what she's read, and then Siobhan will brief us so we can start the conversation about the rest of chapter 1. Let's go, Chanel.
Okay, so the completion of chapter 1 spoke on, well, it began with integrity from the regulator's perspective, and it went into details, just explaining how important ethics is. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it really spoke to the fact that ethics is very important with respect to from a regulator's perspective. And there was further discussion, it further went into explaining principles-based regulation and an outcomes-focused regulations as well. Ms. Sands, please forgive me. I'm just trying to remember all that I read. So I'm just going to give a brief review of what I read. And specifically with respect to the principles-based and outcomes-focused regulation, I spoke to that because I know that area pertains to one of the questions. I think if I'm correct, that's question 4, I think. Yeah, question 4 for our paper. So that would help you with respect to answering that question. They also went, like I said, they spoke specifically on ethics and how ethics is a very serious issue with respect to GRC. And the chapter also spoke on how to manage regulatory risk in a dynamic environment. And it specifically spoke to the fact that it's important let me go back. It spoke to managing how we can manage regulatory risk in a dynamic environment. And the things that they went into were to ensure that there's correct competencies within your staff, to ensure that there's analyzation and formulation of operational solutions to the challenges that may be posed, to challenges that may be posed in a new or an amended regulatory landscape. So, and then it then further spoke to failures that can contribute to regulatory compliance. So that's pretty much it for me, Ms. Sands. I'll let Shelley take it from there.
Siobhan.
Hi.
Thanks, Nell.
Okay, she summed it up pretty well. That would be number 6 and number 7. So I probably should just move on to the appendix with regards to how the importance of the Basel 1, 2, 3, 4, all of those, to assist financial institutions in ensuring I guess in terms of governance, and it goes right back to what we spoke about last week when we spoke about the prudential regulations of controlling setting the limits, and what else did it say? The liquidity ratio and those type of things, the minimum capital recommendations, those stuff like that. And then it summed up pretty much the objectives of the FCA and the PRA. And what else? What else should I mention?
Who's the FCA? Who's the PRA?
Why I knew that question was coming. Chanel, Ms.
So
Regular.
the FCA pertains to the Financial Conduct Authority, and the PRA pertains to the Prudential Regulation Authority.
Okay,
you want me to go into details about that, Ms. Sands, about the FCA and the PRA?
Yes, ma'am. Your colleagues need it.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so the PRA is a division of the Bank of England, and the PRA is responsible for prudential regulation, where they promote the stable and prudent operation of the financial system through regulation of all deposit-taking institutions, which includes insurers and investment banks. The FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, is responsible for conducting like the day-to-day supervision of regulation. So specifically, they do day-to-day supervision of like the retail financial services, that area, and also which includes marketing and promoting and selling of retail products. If I may say one more thing, with respect to the PRA, they focus on their 3 statutory objectives with respect to the PRA, and they promote the safety and soundness of firms that they supervise. They contribute to securing comprehensive, I guess, protection for insurance companies or insurance company policyholders. And there's also an objective where they facilitate effective competition between firms. That pretty much concludes what I have to say, Ms. Sands.
Thanks, Chanel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Did anybody look at it, even though they didn't read it? There are some things the beautiful ladies didn't touch, but they did a good job, so I'm not gonna complain.
Oh, one more thing, Ms. Sands, with respect to the PRA, I think the I remember the PRA, their approach to supervision, I think they take it from a judgments-based approach. Yeah, it's adjustments, and I think I remember there was a judgment-based approach, a forward-looking approach, and a focus approach. So I think if you look in the chapter, I think that's on page 37, if I'm correct. You can see further detail on what those approaches are. And for the FCA, you'll see further details on the FCA with respect to what comes under their remit in terms of good regulation. And they just spoke to efficiency and economy, and then just different things, cost consumers responsibility, senior management responsibility, openness and disclosure and transparency. So you can get further detail on that on page 37. That's my 5 cents.
So, Ms. Sands, is it the appendix is almost like a summary of what chapter 1 is talking about? Hi, Ms. Sands. Hello?
Shelley, you guys there? Can you hear me? Is Ms. Sands there?
I
Yeah,
can-
you. I don't know.
Hear you.
I think the Sands may have. Oh, she coming on right now. I think she getting off.
No, I'm on. I'm just couldn't find how to unmute.
Okay.
Okay.
Somehow my screen did its own thing. And I am not very good with technology. Okay, I'm back. Yes and no. I think the appendix has a lot to do with explaining how it actually works in day-to-day. Because when you look at your question, and if you're writing from a practitioner standpoint, you are going to get a lot of information from what's expected, and also how it's expected to be done.
Okay.
So if you remember last week, we were talking about prudential. Let me go back to it. The one right before in 5, we were talking about, is it 5? 4, prudential compliance. Did anybody go on the central bank's website today or leading up to this?
I haven't.
I haven't.
Okay, if y'all had gone on it, y'all would have seen that they have a whole section under prudential regulation. So please go on and check it out. It's going to help you.
Okay.
So going back to 6. Remember last week we were talking about ethics and integrity and all of those things, and how there are 2 different kind of ways to rule, because you got this perspective, integrity, and of course then you have the rules where it's a tick the box, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And I was saying to you guys at Central Pines, they have both, because it's like a balanced approach. Yes, they give you guidelines and stuff, but then as it relates to prudential compliance and regulation, there are guidelines that you have to obey. You don't have any option.
So Ms. Sands, I just went to Central Bank site, as you said it, right? It said prudential limits, right? And restrictions. And I clicked that section and then I see a whole gamut of other documents. So we're expected to look through all of those.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's just take the wheel.
This is what corporate governance is about. This is what GRC is about.
What
I
is-
mean, you don't.
What's the title? Sorry, what's the title, Nellie?
We have 9 sub-documents under that heading.
Oh, it's more than that, sweetie. You get plenty more than that to read, but I'm just, you know.
Prudential limits?
Prudential limits and restrictions.
Okay, all right.
That's all part and parcel with corporate governance.
Right, and then I see something here, but also says operational guidelines, corporate governance. So we'll need that. We'll need stuff under that heading as well.
Yes, ma'am. And the first 5, I think it was, because I went on today. I think
Because after that, they have money laundering / CFT, which we should have already had. Regulated functions, general information, physical presence and managed licensee guidelines, financial industry regulation, private trust companies.
But you don't need from there down. You don't need, but all the ones before that, you're gonna need.
Okay, so we can still need the AML ones too. Okay. So the first 5 would be prudential limits and restriction, operational guidelines, corporate governance, anti-money laundering / CFT, regulated functions. And I think general information. So we don't need, I guess, general information go up.
I think so. From my memory if my memory serves me right, yeah, go up.
Okay. Let me see if I can copy this.
So when we talk about integrity from a regulator's perspective, can somebody tell me what does that mean?
Sorry, Ms. Sands, repeat your question.
Integrity from a regulator's perspective. I know that Chanel and Siobhan talked about it, but from just a general experience having to deal with a regulator or just in your day-to-day, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like? And why would you have a regulator looking at things from an integrity perspective? We still on 6.
For the first part, it's similar like to what you spoke about last class, where you said like, okay, the central bank doesn't tell you what to do. They give you like the principles. So similarly, like they'll say from a regulator's standpoint, what they expect you to have ingraded in everything that it is that you do, especially pertaining to compliance. And that being integrity. Like they won't tell you how to run your firm, but they expect to at least have that skeleton in your firm.
Like a minimum standard kind of thing?
Yeah, like minimum, yes, at least that you have that. They won't tell you how to hire people, but they would at least expect that you carry out your day-to-day work or your processes with that minimum standard.
Right, and why?
I only got to answer the first part.
No, you
Repeat
can,
the second part.
the second part was
Why would
why.
they-
Why would they do it like that? I mean, you can look at chapter 6, you can look at section 6, it's right there.
Okay.
But you can put it in your own words.
If I may, Ms. Sands, I can chime in on that.
Yes, please do. Anybody?
Okay, pretty much they would want you to have the integrity because they, like Nixon said, they would give you the guidelines and the guidance, but at the same time, there are some things that they want you to use your discretion, and in using your discretion, they expect that you have some sort of ethics and integrity to make the right decision for the, I guess, in terms of ensuring that the proper governance is in place.
Yeah. But y'all can look right at this, right, if you look right in the book.
Ms. Sands, if I may, I'll let somebody else.
No, I was just going to say, does it have to do with protecting the client and doing what's in the best interest of the client?
Yes. And then some other things. Okay, you know what? Let me tell y'all where to go. Go on page 22.
Uh-huh.
To the top.
7.1.
No, we in 6.
Okay, to the top of 22.
Page 22.
Okay.
The
Wait,
top of
wait,
my page 22.
There are a number of reasons for this. Focusing on common principles helps regulators to concentrate limited resources on the issues that really matter to the stakeholders. These include politicians, voters, controlling government departments, consumers, firms, etc., and thereby fulfill its statutory objective more effectively. You're talking about as values underlie a great deal of the content from FCA and PRA regulation, concentrating on principles ensure firms are adhering to many of the more prescriptive rules, or perhaps more crucially, the achievement of the intended outcomes of these rules. If detailed rules can be shown not to be needed as a result, then the regulator can reduce the volume of regulatory standards and cut the cost of compliance. This is politically necessary given the pressure for better regulations. Then you talk about principle-based enforcement, may be more effective and less expensive for the regulator than enforcing narrow rules. In simple terms, the public and the industry understand what being unfair or incompetent means much more readily than breach of a rule X or Y or whatever out there. Then they have the EU directives and principles are more successful at covering unforeseen eventualities and new circumstances so that there is lesser requirement to keep adding new rules to plug the gaps as the market and products change as new circumstances emerge. That's the answer you're looking for, Ms. Sands?
Yes. So now anybody, put that in your own words.
I guess the long and short of it is the integrity is necessary because it helps with lessening the use of or minimizing the use of resources, or I guess it could help with focusing more so the use of human resources. And that also integrity, I guess it gives the ability for people to essentially police themselves. And the regulator just really follows up to make sure that people are compliant, but it causes it not to have to be so stringent and have a exact to say it have to go down this list of stuff. So it's almost like an honor system, almost like.
Agreed. And how is that beneficial to the general public?
I think the public will just have more confidence in the system or the financial industry as a whole.
Keep going, Candira. Why?
Because if firms are acting in their best interest and they are, I guess, transparent, it would make, I guess, supervision of these SFIs easier, less expensive, and I guess just help with market stability of the whole system.
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, as Joe Public, I really don't care how much it costs your bank to run or how much it costs the regulator to regulate you. For me, as somebody, as Joe Public, I understand right from wrong. There's a basic concept, right, of right from wrong. I don't know what the rules are in the bank, so I could care less about a breach. Y'all ain't see that inside there? But if the bank is acting on integrity, let's be honest, integrity is something that most of us have some familiarity with. The general public understands that no, that shouldn't happen. No, that then they were not being transparent. No, they were not being fair. Not that everybody's going to agree, right? But from a consumer perspective, client's perspective, general public's perspective, you could understand why the regulator would want to do that, right? The consumer don't know about the rules in most of these institutions. This is why we still have people going in asking, you need that? Why you need that? In terms of documentation requests and other requests that the bank may have. But if you say to them in simple terms, because you're trying to make sure your account is safe and nobody hacks into it, or something of that nature, you don't think they're more willing to cooperate? It's something, integrity is something that is innate, right? And most of us have an understanding or an appreciation for what it is. Hence, it makes it easier for the regulator and easier for the public. Yes? Does anybody else see it like that? Based
Yes,
on what
I
was
agree.
actually said? Hmm? Hello?
Mr. Hans, I understand what you're saying. Can you just can you just go over that just a little bit more? Because I read something in the chat with respect to this is further down, and I think this can tie in with integrity, where it almost seems as though that they want to weed out companies that are not, for lack of a better word, companies that are weak in terms of being compliant. It makes the overall system better. And so can you explain, like, go back over what you just said? Sorry, I was just a bit distracted.
Point 3 of what Nellie read, it says, principles-based enforcement may be more effective and less expensive for the regulator than enforcing narrow rules. In simple terms, the public, like us, and the industry understands what being unfair or incompetent means much more readily than breaching a rule. Simple terms. That sums up everything I was saying.
Okay, yep, understood.
Does everybody see where I was going with that?
Yes, I understand it now. I mean, it's more clearer now.
Yes, Ms. Sands, you provided the clarity. Thank you.
So if you go right underneath those points, you would see that regulators need to have a balancing act, and that's why they have principled and they have rules-based, because principle-based also has its flaws, right? So let's talk about what are some of the flaws that's a benefit of having the integrity. You know, what's a flaw in having integrity or using that method from a regulator's perspective?
A flaw could be, what if the regulators approach to what a principle is differs from what the company's approach is? Like maybe it leaves too much room for interpretation as opposed to rule-based.
That can be a flaw. Y'all remember what I said earlier before I summed it up with that one point? Integrity is something that's innate, but we don't all have it to the exact same level, right? So it's very subjective if you think about it. We know right from wrong, but then some of us push the envelope. So like Ginger said, there's lots of room for interpretation. Oh, I thought you meant this, what I would say. Things like that, right? What happened to you all tonight, man? What's going on?
Ms. Sands, I writing notes, sorry.
Same here, Ms. Sands.
I'm following you, but I'm just trying to jot down everything you say.
There are other potential flaws, right? In section 6. Give me another one, anybody. I don't want to have to read section 6, but this is important. Because I don't believe in coming to class and reading, but this 6 and 7 are important as a base for your assignment. So we have to go through this to have a very good foundation.
Are you referring to where it says that it's judgment based or judgment based or judgment led?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, ma'am.
I see where it says that even though regulation is now principle based and outcomes focused, it's also judgment based or judgment led. So I guess it's resulting in having to cast judgment on, I guess, the banks or persons involved.
This goes back to what I was saying. There is no right or wrong as it relates to people's level of integrity, right? And we're going to get into ethics as well. yes, we know integrity is innate. However, that's moral, right? It's from a moral perspective. Not everybody have morals, right? And not everybody's morals are the same value or level. And then when we get into ethics, it's like, okay, I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that, but you do, and you do because of your moral compass. Not that I'm wrong or you're right, but we just see things differently. So all of that could be a flaw or a perceived flaw. Okay, you're all quiet, so let's do this. Somebody, we could read 6 and 7 tonight. I don't normally read in class because I think everybody should come to class prepared, but y'all quiet. And y'all quiet because y'all ain't read, so we can't have a full-blown conversation. And y'all need to be at a particular point in your mind so y'all can grasp what it is. Ethics and integrity is very serious. When you're talking about corporate governance and risk and compliance, it is the heart of the matter. So can I get somebody to volunteer to read section 6 and someone to read section 7, please? This is what we come to tonight because y'all really need to, we need to do this tonight. We have to get this chapter 1 down pat. This is very foundational. Pardon?
I'll start with section 6.
Somebody please volunteer section 7 and just continue after Chanel ends section 6. Who's going to read section 7, sorry. Hello.
I'll read section 7.
Thanks. Let's go.
Okay, section 6, integrity from a regulator's perspective. In the UK, the FCA has published its high-level standards in the form of the 11 principles for business, which provide, oh, sorry, Ms. Sands, sorry, I just need to put my glasses on. Karen, get my glasses for me, please. Upstairs, yeah. So I'll start again. In the UK, the FCA has published its high-level standards in the form of the 11 principles for business, which provide descriptions of the behavior expected of firms. Equally, the FCA has targeted outcomes, which drive the ethical purpose of its regulation. For example, outcome 3 begs the question. Sorry, Ms. Sands, give me 1 second. I just need to put on my glasses. Give me 1 second. I apologize. I just had to take out my contacts off and change to my glasses. So I'll start again. In the UK, the FCA has published its high-level standards in the form of the 11 principles for business, which provide descriptions of the behavior expected of firms. Equally, the FCA has targeted outcomes, which drive the ethical purpose of its regulation. For example, outcome 3 begs the question, does the firm have the interest of its customers and the integrity of the market at the heart of how the business is run? Similarly, The Prudential Regulation Authority, the PRA, requires firms to follow its fundamental rules, which are similar to the FCA principles for business and operate in line with the spirit and intended outcome, not managing the business only to the letter or gaming the rules. The fact the FCA's principles, its common values or ethics, run through the FCA's regulations helps to provide the raw material for establishing principles-based regulation, but does not adequately explain why a regulator should emphasize its principles. There are a number of reasons for this. Focusing on common principles helps regulators to concentrate limited resources on the issues that really matter to its stakeholders. These include politicians, voters, controlling governments, departments, consumers, firms, etc., and thereby fulfill its statutory objectives more effectively. As values underlie a great deal of the content of the FCA/PRA regulation, concentrating on principles ensures firms are adhering to many of the more prescriptive rules, or perhaps more crucially, the achievement of the intended outcomes of those rules. If the detailed rules can be shown not to be needed as a result, then the regulator can reduce the volume of regulatory standards and cut the cost of compliance. This is politically necessary given the pressure for better regulation. Principles-based enforcement may be more effective and less expensive for the regulator than enforcing narrow rules. In simple terms, the public and the industry understand what being unfair or incompetent means much more readily than breach of rule X, Y. EU directives, partly because they have to cover a wide range of jurisdictions, are of a principles-based type. Given the stated desire, both of national governments and regulators, not to gold plate by adding additional features, they must concentrate on principles to achieve convergence/compliance with many EU directives. Principles are more successful at covering unforeseen eventualities and new circumstances so that there is a lesser requirement to keep adding new rules to plug the gaps as the markets and products change or as new circumstances emerge. Principles-based regulation is not without critics and has been noted for failures in the UK, while the Financial Services Authority was the principal financial services regulator. Fareda Sands, former head of the FCA, speaking at the said business school in March 2010, acknowledged in the wake of the financial crisis that the FSA should have stepped in earlier in the past, and that the old FSA's reactive policy focused on ensuring that firms had the appropriate systems and controls. Judgments were rarely made on the consequences of management action. The perceived failure of principles-based regulation has resulted in an approach by the FCA that has recently focused more intently on consumer outcomes. So, regulation is now principles-based and outcomes-focused, but is also judgment-based or judgment-led. Martin Wheatley, the first head of the FCA, stated that the FCA represents a new era in financial regulation and that features such as thematic reviews and increased use of the regulator's judgment are here to stay. The intention then is not just to see that systems and controls that comply with the FCA's ethical principles are in place within firms, but to ensure that each firm's outcomes will also promote ethics. Wheatley confirmed this in his speech to the Association of British Insurers. I know some people think this focus on business ethics is a regulatory phase. I've heard it described as a cold breeze that will pass through. But I want to make it clear, the first 100 days of the FCA are a bellwether of things to come. It is lasting change as opposed to the firework that petters out and falls to earth. The financial sector needs to believe this change is permanent and prepare themselves now for the new regulatory world. Undoubtedly, there is a regulatory climate change that has global implications and consequences. The impact of the financial crisis affected the whole world. So the perceived need for ethics is a financial services. So the perceived need for ethics in financial services is also acknowledged across by regulators and governments globally. Ethics is a serious issue. In October 2006, the chairman of the FSA stated that the TCF is but a microcosm of what is still to come. In other words, the principles-based approach and focus on treating customers fairly was due to be widened to cover most areas of regulation, with early examples being anti-money laundering and training and competence. To a large extent, the focus has shifted to anticipated issues before risks crystallize. Regulators wish to see that a principled approach is taken by financial services firms, that ethics is at the core of their culture and values, that both the spirit and the letter of legislation and regulation are being compiled with, and that boards of directors are sincere in their drive for integrity. It has become the prevailing wisdom internationally that principles-based regulation should form some component of the regulatory mix. And it is the ethical basis of both regulation and compliance that is key to the success of regulation. It is likely that this approach will be taken up in both newly developing jurisdictions that are keen to meet international standards, and in the more established jurisdictions to see this as the only logical direction as their responsibilities grow. The key point here is that for a variety of reasons, different jurisdictions progress at different rates. Following the global impacts of the credit crisis, many commentators suggested that financial institutions cannot be trusted to behave appropriately without strictly enforceable rules. This overlooks the fact that the issues that led to the financial crisis were not prevented by the strict rules in place at that time. Also, it must be argued that regulatory regimes now place greater responsibility on the individual companies for ethical practices. It is up to the companies themselves to prove that they are being responsible and they do not have compliance with the written rules as a defense to hide behind if things go wrong. Hector Sands comments clarify the position of the regulator. According to Sands, the difference between the FSA's approach to regulation and that of the FCA centers on whether judgment is based on hard, observable facts, as opposed to the degree to which it is based on a view as to what might happen in the future. From this perspective, judgment-led regulation equals forward-looking regulation, and this underlines the need for ethics in business. Establishing the importance of ethics and integrity. By definition, an ethical framework goes beyond a compliance framework that is based only on a desire simply to comply with minimum legal and regulatory obligations. Professor David Jackman, the individual behind the ethical framework for financial services at the FSA, describes ethics as being a steward, being responsible to broader society and behaving in a proper way. He explains that in our industry, we need to be more subtle in working out what is appropriate, what is practical, and what is realistic. Factors which make it very difficult to apply simple ethical standards. In 2015, the OECD conducted a stock taking of corporate practices, corporate governance, and business integrity. which focused on the role of the board and senior management and the extent to which business integrity considerations are integrated into the overall oversight of a corporation's strategy and operations. The report says, the findings in this report suggest corporate leadership is taking integrity more seriously after the financial crisis. 80% of survey respondents indicated that their company's board was strongly involved in the design and implementation of their company's integrity policy. Almost half indicated that the policy was established following a decision by the board. Increased prioritization of integrity may well have led to an increase in investment in integrity. Almost 20% of respondents considered integrity budgets to have increased from 25% to more than 50% over the last 5 years. The way that such a budget use is perceived speaks volumes about a company's commitment to promoting a culture of integrity. And the results show that 60% of respondents characterize the use of such budget as an investment, as opposed to an expense. At the same time, some companies are exploring cost-efficient ways to a more holistic approach to the business integrity function to address breakdowns in communication between the various independent business integrity areas in the company. While the commitment of the board and senior management on setting the tone from the top is vital to a corporate culture of integrity, it also needs to be underpinned by effective direction and oversight. While regulators do not have sufficient powers to go beyond enforcement of minimum legal and regulatory standards, they are clearly impressed by businesses that do. How then can a compliance professional promote the adoption of an ethical approach to the conduct of business by a firm? It can be difficult to attempt to quantify the value of the enhancements that can result, particularly to a senior management layer interested only in the bottom line. There are clear benefits for the reputation of an organization, but without any quantifiable link to financial benefits, these alone may be inadequate motivators. Both the FCA and the PRA place great emphasis on their high-level standards in the principles for business and fundamental rules, respectively, both when initially authorizing firms and subsequently when supervising them. These set out the fundamental principles on which they should run and act as the foundation on which other rules are based. This is arguably the most important component of their rules, and all of the more detailed regulation relates back to these principles and fundamental rules. The aim of the principles is to focus firms on doing the right thing in the course of conducting business. In other words, behaving ethically. Breaching a principle makes a firm liable to disciplinary sanctions. For example, FCA enforcement notices issued refer to those principles for business that have been breached, as well as any specific sourcebook rule or principle breaches that have occurred. Despite this, many firms continue to focus simply on attaining compliance with the regulations. Because of the difficulty of positively motivating firms to do the right thing, in 2004, the FSA introduced its Treating Customers Fairly, TCF initiative, and it remains an important area of focus for the FCA because the focus of its remit is on the conduct of businesses. As the name suggests, TCF was additional principles-based guidance to encourage firms to behave ethically in the context of customer treatment. This initiative aimed to bridge the gap between the FSA's rules and its principles, and they expected senior management to incorporate TCF into culture and strategy. The overarching arm of TCF was to encourage looking beyond mere compliance with the rules, but rather complying with the spirit underlying them. Today, The FCA retains this focus on high standards of ethics and integrity and emphasizes the importance of ethics and integrity in business. In a speech to the Worshipful Company of International Bankers in March 2014, Martin Wheatley, then the CEO of the FCA, summarized the link between regulations and ethical standards. Now, clearly, regulators and firms still require rules to function effectively. But experience tells us red tape is more easily hurdled than principles. So as we move forward, firms will begin to see themselves held up against stricter ethical standards. Tracy McDermott, the Director of Enforcement and Financial Crime at the FCA, built on this at the annual FCA Enforcement Conference at the end of 2014. And while it is true that individuals are responsible for actions, they don't operate in a vacuum. They operate in the culture and the values of the firms that employ them. And I mean the real culture and values, not that expressed in the mission statement. And firms set the controls that identify the risk in their business and how to manage these. And while cultural change is ongoing, firms have to ensure their controls are adequate. Until the rhetoric matches the reality, relying on people just doing the right thing won't get us there. That completes section 6.
Thanks, Nell.
You're welcome.
Next reader.
Good night again, all. Section 7, managing regulatory risks in a dynamic environment. A mature and thorough approach to GRC helps a company to be aware of all the rules, regulations, legislation, and principles that would affect it. This is achieved through awareness of not only the current position, but also potential or planned changes and understanding the areas subject to heightened scrutiny by the regulators. Examples of changing rules include the Basel III requirements, Financial Action Task Force, FATF recommendations, and the UK and the UK Bribery Act. The transfer of regulatory responsibility for consumer credit from the Office of the Fair Trading to the FCA, and the development of the senior managers and certification regime, which increase individual accountabilities for senior personnel. The question that the firm needs to ask themselves about managing the risks associated with regulatory reforms include the following. Is our governance structure supported by an adequate risk and control framework? Does the compliance function understand and use the ethical base of their role and operation? Without an understanding of ethics, compliance cannot be effective. It is necessary to grasp the direction and regulatory rules and standards are moving towards and the basic intent behind the spirit of the rules. Do we have the correct competencies in our staff to analyze and formulate operational solutions to the challenges posed by the new amended regulatory landscape? Do we have an effective process for interpreting new and revised regulations? How closely is the compliance function integrated into our assurance functions? How robust and comprehensive is the information we have so that we can make sound decisions, report accurately, and then produce compliance solutions? Do we have the best controls in place to address the risks of fraud, abuse, or even excessive and meaningless over-reporting of information? Do we have a monitoring process in place to evaluate the efficiency of all controls and to ensure that regulatory recommendations are followed? 7 and 1. Where to begin with the GRC regulatory strategy? If a firm or organization is uncertain over where to begin its journey towards achieving a GRC strategy that can simplify processes reduce costs, and deal with the compliance burden imposed by increased regulations and tighter scrutiny, it could usefully incorporate the following tips. Ensure the board and senior management commit to and endorse the strategy. Consider all key stakeholders and ensure that all their requirements are accommodated. Establish the guiding principles and be sure that they are aligned with the firm's strategic objectives. Make sure that the risk assessment processes are clear and well-defined. Identify any opportunities that the GRC strategy may present and take advantage of them for the benefit of consumers and the firm overall. Make sure that people, processes, outcome, and management information are used cohesively and collectively in the journey to effective GRC. GRC failures contribute to regulatory compliance failure. In 2012, Barclays PLC was fined heavily by both UK and US regulators over the manipulation of the London interbank offered rate. Commentators at the point pointed to the fact that the bank's internal controls had failed to identify and prevent the activity in the first place. The following is an extract from the report published in 2012. The lack of specific internal controls, particularly in reviewing email communications, was one of the failures cited by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Regulatory order implementing its share of the Barclays settlement. The CFTC said Barclays lacked daily, my system just gone out, sorry, 1 second. I pressed something off, went off my screen, got to open it back up. 1 second, please. Okay, where were we?
You were on page 26 in the quote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, the CFTC said Barclays lacked daily supervision and periodic reviews that could have detected the interest rate manipulation. The order also accused the bank senior management of encouraging executives to submit lower rates that the bank was actually paying. Appropriate daily supervision of the desk by the supervisors, as well as a periodic periodic review of the communication should have discovered the conduct. However, Barclays lacked specific internal controls and procedures that would have enabled Barclays management or compliance to discover this conduct, the CFTC report said. Barclays gave its consent to the imposition of the order without specifically admitting to denying its finding, referring to activities to manipulate the Euribor rate. CFTC report said, multiple traders engaged in this conduct and no attempt was made by any of the traders to conceal the requests from supervisors at Barclays during the more than 4-year period in which the activity occurred. And on occasion, the traders discussed their requests with trading desk managers. It said that Barclays supervisor passed on the trader's concern to a senior compliance officer and a member of Barclays senior management, alleging that the bank was being dishonest in submission, that reported that the LIBOR labor rates. The Barclays senior compliance officer then told Britain's Financial Service Authority he was concerned that the labor reports by the bank were distorted. The senior compliance officer reported in an international email directed to several levels of Barclays senior management that he had informed the FSA of his concerns of a potential distortion of the labor. This officer did not, however, tell the FSA that Barclays was altering its own labor submissions. The same Barclays senior compliance officer did not follow up internally with any labor submitters on their supervisor to confirm that Barclays was not making its labor submission properly, and the bank's practices did not change. Furthermore, the CFTC a report alluded to the possibility that the Bank of England had put pressure on Barclays to manipulate its labor reports. Barclays increasingly felt tremendous external pressure concerning how it was being perceived in the market and the media, particularly due to its high labor submission relative to other panel banks. The firm continued to believe that the other panel banks' labor submissions were unrealistically low, even though it maintained that its liquidity position was in fact strong. Barclays was increasingly worried about these market and media perceptions. At this time, the Bank of England had a conversation with a senior individual at the firm in which it raised questions about Barclays' liquidity position and its relatively high labor submissions. In late October 2008, reacting to this pressure and the discussion with the Bank of England, Barclays believed it needed to lower its labor submissions even further. As a result, bank senior managers ordered that the labor submissions be lowered further. Subsequently, the true extent of the labor manipulation scandal was discovered, and the firms involved in this rate rigging were heavily fined by multiple regulatory globally. We're next for GRC. GRC is a complex subject with multiple interrelationships that need to work together to achieve a maximum benefit of the companies and organizations. GRC's importance to the board has evolved significantly over the past 10 years so that senior management now pay far more attention to these aspects of business as regulators are demanding increasing accountability and transparency for firms' process and procedures. The liability and individuals of their actions and inactions also puts new emphasis on the ethics, culture, and integrity they demonstrate. This scrutiny of ethics and integrity has never been greater and raises an interesting debate. Even though many of these recent financial scandals have been as a result of unlawful actions and behaviors, some have been about activities that are within the letter of the law, yet their ethics have been called into question. Boards and senior managers must ask the question, what is doing the right thing? Opinion on what this is in given any situation is divided, and the firm, employees, customers, and regulators will probably not share the same view on the answer to this. Trust has therefore been compromised by these different views. Leaders of firms therefore need to create a shared sense of doing the right thing and to develop a vision of the core purpose and start to rebuild trust in the firm. And even in the financial service industry, to do this, the board and senior management need to agree on a common set of core values, culture, and ethical standards, and build a governance within the firm to demonstrate assurance. Excuse me. More than this, these leaders must lead with authenticity, which will help in rebuilding trust. By following the right path to achieve the core purpose itself will drive excuse me, the values, culture, behavior, and ethics and actions the firm needs in order to rebuild trust. One thing is certain, it is a changing landscape. Today's acceptable practice and behaviors may lead to criticisms in the future if viewed retrospectively. To acceptability of today's practice needs a closer examination through a GRC and ethics lens. As an example, technological change brings both opportunities and risks. It is the role of both firms and regulators to take advantage of the opportunities while managing the risks. Specifically, there is an uncertainty of not actually knowing what the next development will be. Regulators and regulators and legislators cannot foresee the future, nor can they cannot respond immediately to the new developments. It can take years for new legislation and regulations to be developed, consolidated upon introduced. So how can regulators deal with this uncertainty, and how do GRC mechanisms in regulated companies manage this potential regulatory uncertainty? We need to believe that being proactive is a good and being reactive is bad. However, this is not so strictly true. You can only be proactive in a certain situation, and you can react both well in a considered way, as well badly, usually knee-jerked and rushed. The nature of uncertainty and constant development means the compliance functions have to make more judgment-based decisions based upon information and knowledge at their disposal at the time of the decision. Conduct risks arises from behaviors and interaction with customers and markets. Current and future technological departments may change these behaviors and interactions with other stakeholders. Therefore, we need to consider how conduct risks might evolve, and how much technical knowledge we require to provide an effective compliance oversight. Compliance and a wider GRC mechanism have to become more and more agile and innovative in the ways risk is managed. However, the current ways of identifying and managing risks do not need the core underlying principles changing, but they do require adapting to manage the risks associated with new technologies. And that completes.
And that's it.
section.
Thank you. Y'all see how much time that took? Everybody wait, because Buddy was yawning, so I guess he was like, boy, there's plenty reading.
Time change, it get dark, make you see me later.
So, does everybody now understand how important GRC is? You know, the book telling you it's complicated, that speaks volumes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
So let's go through the learning outcomes. But before we do that, let's take a break because all y'all sound like y'all sleepy. It's 7:29, 7:30 basically. Let's take a 15 minutes break. Sorry, Siobhan. And when we come back, we're going to discuss the learning outcomes in addition to going through the appendix. We're not going to read the appendix, but we're going to go through the appendix because that's also very important to the foundational aspect of your paper. Okay?
All right. Not a problem.
15 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, Ms.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm back. Did anybody look over anything while we were gone?
No.
Okay, so let's go through the learning outcomes. So I want answers to all of these outcomes so I could be confident that you guys understood what chapter 1 was about, because chapter 1 was a lot of information. So let's start. Critically evaluate the concept of regulatory compliance as acceptance of standards within a regulated environment. Somebody, anybody, tell me what that means in their own words. Y'all want me to start calling names? Nobody can answer that? No one can answer that? So you mean to tell me we spent 2 weeks and nobody knows the first point, the learning outcomes? No one could critically evaluate the concept of regulatory compliance? Come on, people, someone say something. Am I on mute? No, I'm not. Wow. Okay.
You could repeat
Can
it again,
anybody-
please.
It's right in the chapter, I mean, page 39. Critically evaluate the concept of regulatory compliance as accepted regulated environment. What does that mean? That's one of the, I'm looking at the learning outcomes on, because honestly, I don't think that you guys grasp chapter 1. Can you all hear me?
Yes, Ms. Sands.
We can.
Can anybody discuss why effective GRC within an organization should include conduct of business, prudential compliance, and good company conduct in the market? Can anyone talk about or apply the objectives of regulation reflecting on the impact this has for an organization, industry, and sector? Can anyone appraise the links between ethics, integrity, principles, and regulations within an organization, industry, and sector? Does anybody understand how to execute an effective GRC program to respond to the dynamic nature of the regulated environment? Or can anyone evaluate the next steps for GRC mechanisms and controls in a dynamic and evolving environment? Anyone? Any of those points?
I'll take a stab at the first one.
Go ahead.
Okay, critically evaluate the concept of regulatory compliance as acceptance of standards within the regulated environment. I guess this would be considered when we, in the beginning, we started and we spoke about governance, risk, and compliance. And I guess in terms of compliance being a factor to this three-prong approach in terms of within a regulated environment. I guess when we look at the risks, we would determine how the importance of, I guess, compliance with regards to regulations. I don't know. I mean, that's just my 5 cents.
Thanks for being brave to tell us your 5 cents. It's close. But you see the specific words in there? Remember we talked about the difference between regulatory compliance and AML compliance, like you said in the first class?
Yes.
So what this is asking you to do is evaluate that concept, right? That concept as it's accepted as a standard within a regulated environment, like that regulatory compliance concept is accepted, let's just say a bank or an insurance company. So evaluate that, critically evaluate that concept. You're on the right path. So based on what I just said, tell me what you think.
Okay. Critically evaluate that concept. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, with regards to compliance, and I guess, let me take it from a layman's term. I'll use the insurance industry with regards to compliance in the insurance industry, like in terms of the policies and procedures that we have with regards to KYC information. We are regulated by ICB to get those verification documents for each client. Is that how compliance is accepted in the regulatory environment?
What was the last part you said? That wasn't clear for me.
With regards to, like, we have been mandated by the regular ICB to request KYC information from all clients. So these verification documents are now a part of the compliance concept, which is governed by the regulators in our industry.
Right. So critically evaluate that. What's the importance of having that like that?
The importance of it is to I guess to verify the actual client and to know your customer, just to ensure that to mitigate any type of money laundering, or am I on the right track?
Yeah, but don't say money laundering, this GRC.
Okay.
To mitigate any what? Risk. That's the word I need you to say.
Okay, to mitigate any risks.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what a critical evaluation is. You know what's already in place, but evaluate it. You know what I mean? Like, it's there to do this. It's there to do that. This is why it's being done.
Okay,
You see what I'm saying?
okay,
And from a regulatory perspective, regulatory compliance, as opposed to just the money laundering aspect. Remember, we're in GRC now. So we're
Okay.
taking on other risks.
okay, the other risk, okay, that's true.
Right. So it's just not from a money laundering. It could be from an operational perspective. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Right. That's a different class of risk. It could be
Okay.
from a compliance perspective, which brings in the ethics that we just talked about. Yes.
Okay, yes.
Because ethics isn't necessarily a tick the box. It's not like, okay, if you do this, it's money laundering. Ethics is more than that. It's morally based. So, there are certain things that you do in the insurance company to ensure that your obligation, so let's just say a beneficiary, is in place. You know what I mean?
Yes,
That's from an ethical standpoint. Not just that's the rules ICB say.
okay,
So ICB sets rules, but ICB sets rules and also gives you a window to do other things using your integrity as an organization and ethics from your employees, or your staff, with the hope that your customers benefit. Yes?
okay.
So you understand how, if you were to get a question like that, how you'd think.
Yeah, now I understand how I should have approached it.
Right. Okay, so Siobhan did the first point for us. Let's go, somebody else. Discuss why effective GRC within an organization should include the conduct of business, prudential compliance, which we talked about earlier, and good company conduct in the market. Someone else, please respond to that.
I'm sorry, Ms. Hans, when I walked in the room, y'all were already midstream, and so I don't really have context on what y'all were talking about. Can you?
Okay, now, so what I'm doing is I'm going through the learning outcomes, right, on page 30, because I'm not confident that you guys have grasped chapter 1. So it says, after studying this unit, students will be able to. And it's clear that nobody has grasped it because I'm on point, the second point, and Siobhan took a stab at point 1, and we walked through it. So based on your entire reading of chapter 1, why effective GRC within an organization should include X, Y, and Z is what I'm asking, which is point 2 on the learning outcomes. You understand what I'm doing now?
That's wrong.
Okay, so I need somebody to answer. We could go till 9 o'clock tonight because you all gotta understand this tonight. Because we don't have time to come back to this chapter, and this is important. If you don't get this, I can guarantee you, you will not pass your paper. Talk, let's ask questions, something. I feel like I'm dragging you all tonight. Come on, let's go. If you don't understand, take a stab. Let's walk through it. You see what happened with Siobhan? She took a stab, we walk through it.
Hello?
Hey, Kendira. Hey, Kendira.
I was talking and y'all couldn't hear me, obviously.
Oh, no, sorry, you were mute.
Yeah, I unmuted, but it seems like nobody could hear me. I was gonna take a stab at the second point.
Go ahead.
Effective GRC within the organization would affect I guess the industry as a whole in terms of financial stability, customer confidence. When we go back to, I guess, the objectives of the regulator, when we talked about just having a transparent financial system, I meant to say, and just having that integrity in order to be able to trust that the customers are being treated fairly and that the market is fair. I don't know if I ramble in, but that's what I gather from that. And even in terms of having all of your prudential limits set and having those hold on, sorry about that. Hold on. Sorry. Just ensuring that companies are not gonna fail and really cause the whole industry to fail. So that's my 5 cents.
Good stop. Good stop. Anybody else want to take a stab at it? Or build on what Candice said, which is a good base?
I guess my answer would be the effectiveness of GRC within the organization when you're looking at the conduct. Sorry, one.
The conduct of business also includes the tone that is set from management and the culture of the firm, the way that the firm chooses to address concerns of customers, the way that customers are treated from an ethical and integrity standpoint.
Yes, Cindy, thank you so much for speaking tonight. That's true. I appreciate that. See, you're building on what Candice said. Let's go, people. This is what I want y'all to start doing, talking. Let's go. Yes, Cindy.
I guess in addition to what Candira said, in addition to protecting the industry, it protects depositors and stakeholders also.
Agreed. Us, right? Joe Public.
Yes.
Correct. Remember I talked about that? That was, I mean, like I rambled on about that for about 5 minutes tonight. Okay, so let's talk about how to apply the objectives of regulation, reflecting on the impact this has on organization, industry, and sector. So for those of us who work in banking, just think about how regulation impacts us. Impacts the company, impacts the financial services industry, and the sector in which we operate. Anybody can answer this. Well, feel free.
Sorry about just now. That was from calling a dancer. But I would say in this instance, the objective of regulation is just to ensure that there is some standard that all licensees follow, and to ensure just even in terms like when we talk about the prudential and all that stuff like that type of regulation, it's just really to give like a basis for people to, or I should say firms, to follow and ensure that there are checks and balances in place to minimize risk as much as possible, so that the industry can be a thriving one for the persons involved in it, i.e. the firms and persons who actually use the industry.
What's the impact, Linnell? That's a word you missing out. What's the impact of all of that?
Like I said, the impact of that is just ensuring that there's governance, that people don't go wayward. And if I remember correctly, it was even thinking about an example I think we had last week when we talked about, I think you would use one of the banks and how there should be a certain amount of monies that they have to back for each account that they have. That's where my mind went on in terms of just ensuring that I guess people ain't just willy-nilly setting up shop and doing stuff that could possibly bring risk to the industry itself and risk to the customers who are using it.
So the words, I'm trying to get y'all to be able to think like how you'd write. The impact is on the confidence, right? The confidence in the marketplace, confidence of us, confidence of employees, right? That's one of the objectives of regulation. You bring in confidence, you bring in stability. Yeah?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's appraise the links between ethics, integrity, principles, and regulations within an organization, industry, and sector. You see how they're breaking this down? You notice that in a couple of these questions that have all three of these things?
Right.
Which means that there is a difference, right? If you were to get that in a question, there's a difference. Organization, the bank, industry, retail banking, sector, financial services. Got it? Let's go. Let's talk about the links between ethics, integrity, principles, and regulations.
Well, I know from the start you said ethics and integrity in particular, they basically go from a moral standpoint, so it's innate as to whether or not people have ethics or integrity, and then two, depending on that, it based on the innateness in them, how much or how little the person and or company may have based on the moral standards. I ain't really sure how to tie in the principles and regulation part yet in my mind.
I think that the regulator gives companies the, I guess, the leeway or give them their own, what's the word I'm looking for? They have the ability to be ethical in their own way. They said regulations, but however, in terms of carrying them out, they expect that these companies would be ethical and have integrity within the organization. However, the challenge is that each company or each individual will have different levels of ethics or interpret ethics and integrity in a different way. And so they are all linked in that, the overall expectation is that they would do or perform in the best way for the customer and the industry and the sector, even in terms of how the international sector or the international bodies view our financial system. However, like I said before, there are challenges with that, in that they still have to pull in some type of rules or regulations to guide these companies to acting in the best interest of the industry.
Thanks, Kendira. Somebody else could jump on that because there's a point that I'm waiting to hear.
Well, I'm just gonna say that in my view, it will be like the principles of the organization. Well, I guess let me go to the regulations of the organization. That's gonna be pretty much directed from the regulator. So, I mean, that it will just be rules-based, eh? That would be considered rules-based?
If it's from the regulator, yeah.
Okay, so piggybacking on what Linnell had said, the ethics and the integrity, that would pretty much stem from, I guess, the senior management, and they would set the tone for the culture and the ethics and the integrity of the company. In terms of the principles, I'm not sure about that one, but yeah, that would be my 5 cents on that.
So does ethics and integrity fall under principles or regulation? That's what I'm trying to get somebody to say.
Principles.
I would
Correct.
know. Oh, which one? Okay.
Say it again, Ms. Sands. You're saying ethics and integrity fall under principles?
Yeah, that's not regulation. You can't regulate in ethics.
Right. No.
That's what when I said I wanted somebody to build on it, I wanted to make sure that you can differentiate that.
Oh, okay.
Because you see when it says principles and regulations, those are two separate things, right? But principles would encompass the ethics and the integrity, whereas the regulations will encompass the rules, like the capital requirements and the liquidity rules and all of those things.
Okay.
Yes?
Yes.
Everybody clear on that?
Repeat that for me, please.
Okay, so from a principles perspective, because it says, appraise the links between ethics, integrity, principles, and regulations, right? Ethics and integrity would fall under principles because they're not regulations. You can't regulate ethics and integrity. Regulations, obviously, is what the regulator would set. Those are rules, right? So there's principles and then there are rules. So you have to know the differentiation between them. Under regulations, you get regulatory compliance, you get prudential compliance, which talks about capital requirements and all of those things covered under the Basel Accords and stuff, right? And then under the principles, you have ethics and integrity. Those things that are not tangible, they're intangible. Yeah?
So this is similar to this is like what we spoke about, like with the first class when you spoke about the principle base and the rules base. The ethics and integrity would be, like you said,
this is exactly what we spoke about.
Okay, I follow you.
This is it.
Okay.
So, understand how to execute an effective GRC program to respond to the dynamic nature of the regulated environment. Let's go with that. And you could piggyback right off what we just finished saying. Anybody?
Well, Ms. Sands, you spoke with respect to it's important not just to have a rules base, or it's important that you have a balanced approach to it because just as you spoke earlier, one is intangible and one is it's not tangible. And the fact that there can be room for interpretation with respect to ensuring that there can be room for interpretation. So it's important to have a balanced approach with respect to having an effective GRC program. I'm trying to, that's my 5 cents. I could go a little further, but that's my 5 cents. And when I said room for interpretation, there could be flaws. So it's important that, and when I say flaws, like, you know, integrity, like you said earlier, integrity is something that could be, it's subjective. There are potential for flaws. So I'm just looking back at the question, understand how to execute an effective GRC program to respond to the dynamic nature of the regulated environment. Understand how to.
Okay,
So when
Chanel.
executing,
Go ahead, sorry.
when executing an effective GRC program, it's important to, like I said, that there has to be a minimum standard. You want to have that integrity. At the same time, you want to ensure that, you know, there's not that leaving of that room for interpretation. So it's important to have a balanced approach to have an effective GRC program.
Actually, you do need the room for interpretation because when you think about it, ethics and integrity can be regulated. But you need to have that within a framework. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So while
yes.
it is a balanced approach, right?
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
not a one size fits all.
Okay, so when you spoke to that framework really is your guideline.
Correct. Because the framework will involve what you can do, what you can't do, and whatever in the middle will be you make the decisions based on ethics and integrity, but making sure you don't cross that line, right? Of what's illegal, what's immoral.
Yes.
So there has to be room for interpretation, but within a specific framework.
Right, so you'd have to, when it says to understand, that's what I'm saying, having that balanced approach, having both. There has to be both. So, but the framework will spell out or will specify what is, I guess, in your terms, what would be
the framework will specify what the company can and can't do, and that's going to be based on senior management. That's going to be based on the controls. That's going to be based on their conduct and all of the things that we previously discussed. But all of those things aren't necessarily coming from the regulator, right? Your mission statement, your vision statement, things like that. Those are things that the company is supposed to stand by. So those are morally based. Yeah.
Okay,
So
understood.
Sorry. So the framework will like kind of entail the regulations, the legislations, the principles and the rules of the organization, just to ensure that everything is balanced based on, I guess, operations and the regulations, the regulator.
Correct.
So that you won't have that issue with any sort of regulators coming to bother you to say, oh, well, you're not doing this, or you need to improve on this aspect of the business, that sort of thing, just to have that framework to ensure that you're able to operate and ensure that the client is protected and satisfied and the regulator is the same?
Yes. So the regulations almost draws like that line you can't cross, but the company itself makes up the rules within that framework, within that box. Let's put it like that.
Okay.
Is everybody understanding that?
It's starting.
Yes, Ms. Sands.
It's starting to come through.
Yeah, it's starting to come. So Ms. Sands, just to, if I make sure I'm clear, like you explained, you said the regulation itself, like it draws the line that you cannot cross, right? And then then companies within the industry and the sector then will make their framework from based on what the regulation indicates. Is that correct?
Correct. So let's put it in this context. You know, when we did AML, it was risk-based approach.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So
Yeah.
this is the GRC version to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
My understanding is, let's say, or my example is that, let's say the regulators give you guidelines or regulations, but the company has to go and develop a policy based on those regulations that fits their own company or their individual values. Is that correct?
That's correct, Kandira.
Kandira,
Because it's not a
thank you.
one size fits all, right? Because when you make rules for big banks,
Okay.
it's not going to be the same thing for smaller banks.
Right.
However,
Right, because every company wouldn't have the same exact policy, right? I mean,
exactly,
they'll have like variations in their policies, but it all would come under what the regulator has put out there or expects them to be guided by.
exactly. Because remember now, every company has a different strategy. So their policies and procedures, their mission statement and their value proposition, all of it has to come together for that specific company. Everybody might not want the same thing to happen. They might all want to be profitable, but some companies have target markets, right? Then some companies take on anybody. If you're taking on anybody, obviously your rules and your policies are going to be different than people who just say, I only want to deal with this.
Right.
I want to do this one thing and do it well, as opposed to someone wanting to offering a buffet of services or products. It's going to be different. But still, there's that minimum standard that the regulators put in place. You can't cross that line.
Right.
But then the board determines from a corporate governance perspective that, hey, X, Y, and Z is what we want this company to accomplish. And we're going to do it and achieve it doing A, B, and C. From an ethical standpoint, from an integrity standpoint, and also from a regulatory compliance standpoint. And that's how you would implement and execute an effective GRC program. Remember, in section 7, it talked about the complexities and how they're interconnected, interrelationships.
Yes.
You can't have one without the other because it won't work. And the regulated environment changes. When it says the dynamic nature, it changes, because what we're doing today, we didn't do when I was a compliance officer.
Okay.
I mean, when I initially got into compliance some 17, almost 18 years ago.
Okay.
We were pretty much ticking the box. You got this, you got that, you got the next thing. Okay, good. But now we're making judgment calls. We're making analytical decisions.
Mm-hmm.
One day it's okay to have this customer from this country, then the country signs a TAIR or some agreement, and then all of a sudden dying okay no more. So the nature of the regulated environment changes. Yes?
Okay.
Ms. Sands, thank you. I think it's coming clearer now with your prodding of pushing us to answer the questions, I must say. And thank you everybody for that contributed. I got the visual picture now.
I still ain't convinced, I ain't gonna lie to you, Chanel, but this is important. This chapter 1 is the basis for this assignment.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm happy you're the prodding, the pushing, because I'm gonna be honest, I don't think I was completely clear with you explaining it just even a little further now. Like I said, it's more clarity for me specifically. I'm just speaking for myself.
The last learning outcome is to evaluate the next steps for GRC mechanisms and controls in a dynamic and evolving environment. So let's go, people. Let's talk about that. And notice the words evolving, dynamic. That was just spoken about in section 7. So if you don't remember, scroll up to section 7 and see how best to respond.
I would say that it's pretty much just like what you I guess you just kind of answered this question before we got to it. When you spoke about governance, risk, and compliance, they go hand in hand, and that it is a complex, the word is interrelationship, that they need each other to work together to be efficient and effective. I guess pretty much how I would use an example, like in this environment now with COVID-19, procedures have changed, policies have been changed to accommodate this changing environment right now. And we have to adjust ourselves to be able to manage it effectively.
Sorry, I was on mute. You on the right track. Someone else jump in, help her. There's some other things that needs to be said.
It talks about integrity and in ethics and integrity also. And like in terms of the board has to agree to set that standard for the organization, to build that culture, and what else it talked about?
And Ms. Sands just adds to what, oh. Sorry, Kandira, you were speaking?
No, I was just gonna say, it needs to be flexible in terms of, because it keeps changing. So, anything like the regulators and companies alike need to be flexible with I guess how they deal with the changes. Who was speaking, Siobhan? I think she was saying like COVID is a good example in terms of having to adjust, and it's you're always adjusting to GRC based on what's going on in the environment. So.
Agreed. So a perfect example using COVID would be, before time, the central bank used to say you need to get certain things hard copy, right? In this environment, when you can't see people, they're okay with you accepting certain things duly certified, right? No wet stamp, electronically signed, things like that.
Right.
So this is where we're going in terms of the next steps for GRC mechanisms and controls. So obviously, because the central bank has, I wouldn't say loosened, but they have relaxed some of their policies because of the pandemic, the controls and organizations also have had to been relaxed. Yes?
Yes, systems and the controls. Yes, you're correct.
Right, agreed.
And in this environment, it's evolving. We don't know how long we could be in a pandemic. So as we go, things change. Constant moving.
Now, Ms. Sands, I have a question just with respect to that evolving nature. Like how you said, I know because of due to the pandemic, like you, central bank, you know, it's accepting things from an electronic standpoint and what have you. Now, my question has to do with respect to the risk. And, you know, we talked, you told us, look at this, you know, risk, not just the AML risk, but this is GRC now. From a risk standpoint and the evolving nature of what's going on, and companies having to relax, I mean, their controls in the organizations, then how does it affect? I'm trying to just get an understanding how, from the whole GRC perspective, then the impact. Can you speak to that part of it?
Okay, so let's think about COVID, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You either accept the things electronically or spread the virus. Simple, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So another thing, the central bank don't control what the government does. If the government say you can't go to the office, work from home, if you can't work from home, close down your business, because that's how the orders are written, what you could do.
Right.
So in terms of impact, you have to think about what is going to impact more, what is going to be more material. Obviously, the risk of fraud is going to go up, but then by increasing the risk of fraud, you decrease the risk of catching the coronavirus. It's a yin and yang.
Yes, ma'am.
So regulators have to balance. And so there are just some things that have to be done. Think about it. We weren't accustomed to all of this payment online, and that's why a lot of these companies ain't surviving, because they ain't nothing but accepting no payment online and buying online and whatever. Listen, traveling to Europe for the last decade, I used to tap and go. Most people here tapping, they don't even have it, you know, you can't even tap and go nowhere here. It's very rare that you can tap. It's a feature on the machine that accepts payment that they have not enabled. In the UK now, because of COVID, if you don't have, if your purchase is under 35 pounds, they ain't trying to take no money from you. You tap and you roll out. Because why? They've had to change. They don't want the interaction. So you have to be prepared to evolve or get left behind. And in financial services, we don't have the luxury of getting left behind. You see what happened to businesses that can't open because they don't have an online inventory? Everything was brick and mortar. I think we talked about this early on in our AML class. About how Bahamian people like cash.
Yes.
Where they using it now? Only the food store?
Ms. Sands, this may be off the topic, but I just have a question. You know, when you talk about the changes in terms of the systems and the controls, like for me in the insurance, like we were never allowed to email certificates for motor insurance and the like, right? Now we are able to do it because of this pandemic, like you explained. But why is it that we can't, like, I'm thinking like that is just like so antiquated, because like in the United States, you can just, everything is paperless and you just email your certificates and there's no one coming into the office and stuff like that. So why is it that we in the Bahamas can't get to that level in terms of the insurance industry? I mean, this is just a question for you based on your.
That's a rhetorical question I can't answer. Because I mean, and I had to license my car in the pandemic. I ain't gone into the office yet. I pay online and she emailed me my coverage.
Right. But that is what we're doing now. But I mean, like in the past, we could never do that. That's like unheard of.
But that's what I'm saying. So obviously the regulator caused you not to be able to do it. So now they've had to relax their policies, their
Right.
regulation.
Yeah.
So because they relaxed it for you guys are now able to service your customers better.
Right,
They
right.
had to find a way to do it because the government mandated them. Listen, no one could come into the office. What you could do? Remember when the first set of orders come out, and in the orders it was talking about your policy ain't gonna lapse if you don't pay it? There was
Right.
mass confusion.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
So all of those things, which is obviously governance,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a risk involved if your policy lapse. Who taking on that risk?
Right.
And then there's compliance with the laws and the rules that have already been put in place. So this pandemic has shown us that how far back we are as a country.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
But so now we all have to do our part to ensure that we do what is necessary. So when you're evaluating the next steps, all of these things you have to think about. Because this is a very fluid situation. If this curve don't get flattened and we go on lockdown like the UK, then we go all be complaining we can't come out of our house and businesses can't even open for curbside. Then obviously it could be something different you gotta do, right?
Right, right.
So Ms. Sands, the point I'm making, and you know, it's like we're literally living in an evolving situation, and the question here, like this learning outcomes, we're literally in an evolving environment.
Exactly.
Literally.
But so do you all understand now the difference between GRC and AML? You see how not easy, but AML was just AML. You see the complexities involved in GRC?
I
Very
guess
much so, ma'am. Very
yeah,
much so.
part and parcel of the whole GRC framework. It's just a small snippet of it.
Indeed.
Right. So you all work me dead out tonight. So I'm still not convinced, to be honest with y'all, that y'all understand chapter 1. I'm going to ask every single person in this class, because I'm going to go down the list and I'm going to ask you if you understand it. If you don't understand it, let's talk about what you don't understand before this call ends tonight. Because we ain't coming back to chapter 1. If you don't get this foundation, you are going to be in trouble with your paper. Siobhan.
Hi.
Do you understand chapter 1? Do you get the basis, the basic?
I do. I'm gonna go over it again. And take my time and, you know, just take notes and write down any questions that I have. But I mean, like, when it was very helpful tonight going over the questions, because like, even though I'm didn't have the, I guess you walked me through some of the question. It allowed me to think about the question more, and you were walking me as to how to answer it. So that, it gave me a better understanding of the topic.
Okay, Cindy.
I think I have the basis of it, but just like Siobhan said, I'm going to go through it again, just to make sure before I move on to chapter 2. But I don't have any questions at this time for chapter 1.
Okay, thanks. Danielle?
Hi, sorry, can you hear me? Hello? Hello?
Daniel, you
Hello?
sound very, very far.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can't hear you, Danielle.
Oh, good evening. I get the gist of it. I just need to probably go through it again. But I made some notes from what I read. I get the gist of it.
Okay, Ginger?
Hi, yes, I understand. No question.
Is iPad Janessa?
Yes, ma'am. Good night. I don't have any questions, but I think I underestimated how important the chapter was. So I just need to read over it. I think I'll be fine.
Okay. Candira?
I understand the gist of it. I just want to go over the first point in the learning outcomes. Something I wasn't connecting for me. The first point about acceptance, critically evaluate the concept of regulatory compliance as an acceptance of standards within the regulated environment.
Okay, I'll go over that once, everybody else. I'll do all the questions at the end.
Okay.
Nelly?
Yes, ma'am. I would say that I think I got a better understanding from the class, but I, like everybody else, I think I want to go and read it again by myself to make sure that I digested it. But I think my general summary of it is that I guess looking at GRC in terms of I guess looking at this, I overall look at it as the standards for which the industry is governed by, and looking at it more closely from the regulatory aspect of it to say how the regulators play such more of a pivotal role in the GRC process. I think for me, when I look at AML, even though we had regulators involved, I think for me it seemed as if it was more so on the firm itself. But now, even though in this instance, the regulators may not be exactly down to the T in it, I just feel like I guess the guidance of it is a little bit more different from just the simple AML, and then also recognizing that AML is just part and parcel of the whole GRC framework. I don't know if that makes sense of what I said, but that's how I understood it. So like I said, I'll go back and read it again and see how it works from there.
Nelly, man, you confuse me, but okay, you as long as you understand, I good.
That's how I understood it. That's why I said I love to go back and read it again to make sure. But I mean, okay, let me see how best I can explain this, because I just have to go at things a couple of times to make sure I get it. GRC is the framework from the regulators say, okay, this is the general framework we give you to go with. And based on like how we had the discussions tonight about ethics and integrity and all that different stuff like that, it's more so like I just in my mind trying to separate so I don't focus so much on AML aspect of it and focus more on GRC. So I have to tell my mind that AML is a subset of GRC. That's correct, right?
I wouldn't say that that's correct. There's a difference, but keep them separate in your mind. However, you gotta fix it in your mind, they separate. I'm not necessarily a subset of it in and of itself, but it can be looked at it like that, but I wouldn't say that.
Okay. So yeah, I just need to go back and do some more read. I guess go back and, because I didn't get to finish reading the whole chapter before we actually looked at it. So I know I need to personally digest it myself. And so maybe that would help me get it. But I think too with it, it helps you, I guess the important part of it is looking at the type of regulation that is involved. And the, how should I put it? Yeah, basically the type of regulation and I guess setting the standard and people going and how y'all talk about being fluid and all that stuff like that. So it's just me having to digest it in my mind. I don't know if I fully digested it for myself.
Okay. Gordy?
I just need an opportunity to go back over, and I think I'll be okay. I don't have any questions at this time.
Shari Moxie?
Similar to what everyone said, I think I need to read through the entire chapter myself, but I understood the conversation and discussion as it was going along. I think I did more listening tonight than talking, but I think once I read through it, it'll all come together. But I don't have any questions now.
Nikita?
I think I understand most of chapter 1. I need to go over section 6 and 7 again. I think those were some pretty meaty sections, but for the rest of it, I made notes and I have a good understanding of that, but just in 6 and 7, I need to go over again.
Chanel?
Ms. Sands, I too, I'm more, it's more clear for me now. I don't have any questions, but I still feel even though I read the chapter and I took some notes, to fully assimilate all of it, I just think I need to just read it one more time. And I think I'll be really confident then. But everything is clear to me. And after going through the questions and what we did tonight, it really was helpful for me. So I don't have any questions at this time.
Shari Nixon?
Similar to what everyone said, I feel like I don't have any questions. I understood what everyone was speaking about, but I do think I need to read over by myself for it all to come together.
After the party, after the party.
After the party.
All right, I think I covered everybody. Okay, we haven't even begun to look at the appendixes yet. So let's do a quick run through of the appendix. Like I told you guys earlier, the Basel II Accords, people call it BAL and all kinds of things, but I say Basel Accords. They talk about credit, liquidity. So those things are going to be important. This says it has 3 pillars, but I think they have more than 3 now. This Basel Accord makes up like a third of the CIRM certification, the Certified International Risk Manager certification. And it's a lot. It's a lot to learn and to remember as it relates to which accord covers which. So pillar 1 covered minimum capital requirements, right? new rules for credit and operational risk, and encourage the use of internal controls and management. Pillar 2 covered the supervisory process. Pillar 3 covered market discipline. I am sure they're probably on pillar 4 or 5 by now, because it's a lot of additions to the first 3 pillars. So please familiarize yourself with this, because it's important as it relates to prudential compliance. This is very much rules-based because it has literal, specific requirements. What percentages you have to have for capital requirements, what percentages you are allowed to have in credit, your liquidity requirements are all going to be based on the Basel Accords. Obviously, the Bahamas would use it as like how we use FATF, we put it into our own framework, but that's where it's based. Yes? Anybody who knows anything about credit or liquidity or operational risk should be familiar with the Basel Accords. Very important. The objectives of the FCA and PRA are okay to know, but if you're writing your paper from a Bahamas standpoint, then you need to familiarize yourself with the central bank and SEB guidelines. That speaks to prudential regulations, that speaks to corporate governance and operational guidelines. They're all on the central bank's website.
So Ms. Sands, take me back to my question. I sent the links inside our WhatsApp group, right? So you can find it. But under like the prudential guidelines, they had like or prudential limits or whatever. They had like 6 different documents underneath that. So we need to look at all of those in relation to that.
I think you need to read the question and then see which one of those documents are necessary to answer. But for me, I would look at all, but that's just me. You know, you're probably not going to need all of them, but because I work in this industry, I would look at all. But you're not going to need all of them to answer your questions, but it'll be good to know because a lot of them are interrelated as well. They're not very long, to be honest with you. Central bank longest guideline, to be honest, is the AML one. So there's a lot in here, a lot of examples. You know, when they like to say, give examples. So if you're using the Bahamas, I don't know, you can find examples, I guess, very few online, but if you want to be able to go back and see some enforcement actions on page 43, 44, you can go back and look to see how the FCA handles when you breach their rules. So a lot of this is about the FCA, which obviously is the regulator in the UK, where this course is from. So you would need to obviously understand the Central Bank of the Bahamas and the SEB, their parallel rule for their licensees in the Bahamas. You see the tasks on page 51.
Sorry, Ms. Sands, can you repeat that? You said that the SEB?
Right, so SEB and Central Bank have guidelines for corporate governance, unfit and proprietary, like who could be a director, who could be a non-executive director, all of those things. Both of them have guidelines and rules for their licensees.
Okay, thank you.
So if you look at the last page in chapter 1, which is page 51, to be able to know if you fully understand chapter 1, I would answer these questions on my own. These are excellent questions for you to test your knowledge. I'm not saying write them all out or whatever, but look at them and have the correct answer. It will definitely help you in your paper.
Okay.
Answer all 5. Use this task as a note-taking session. Because if you don't know the answer, you have to go back and see where you can find it. And I can guarantee you, you'll be able to use it in your assignment. Yes?
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, for those of you who don't like read, next week, please come to class prepared so we don't have to read in class. Because reading in class is very boring. As you can tell, we did it tonight, right? Yes? I think we all do better when everybody is already read and we can have discussions as opposed to reading in class. Reading is something you can do at home. So let's come prepared next week so we don't have to read in class, please. I do not like reading in class. I think it takes away from the discussions, and I think it also takes away from the liveliness of the class when you're just sitting and listening to somebody. After a long day of work, that's not something I want to do. I prefer to have discussions because you're going to remember things, and your papers always ask for examples. And so you're going to have to write your papers, I tell you before, as a practitioner and not as a regulator. And it helps, discussions help with writing it from a practitioner's point of view, because I'm a practitioner. I'm very much hands-on. This is what I do for a living. Unlike most of you who won't know a lot of what I'm sharing because you're just trying to get into it. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
So please come prepared next week with your chapter 2. Try and answer those questions. You don't have to spend too much time on it, but I'd say, give yourself an hour to do the task. I know you can find all this time from between now and next week, but it's worth trying to do. And also, please start looking at your papers with a view of knowing that you literally only have 5 weeks. Don't put no extension in your head because you haven't been extended an extension. Yes? Yes?
Not
Yes,
yet.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Understood.
Don't say not yet, because to be honest with you, all an extension does is push back and cause you to procrastinate more.
That's true.
If you think you have to do it by the 7th, then put it in your head, I have to do it by the 7th, and you'll get it done. You just adjust some things. This isn't the way I look at school, and I'm always doing something. It's not going to be for forever, but it will help you achieve a life goal. So if you gotta, move some things around in your life to make sure you put in the time to do this, you only got 6 more months to do this, 7 more months max, and then you'll be done with this, but you'll have a certification that's globally recognized. That can do some other things for you. So if you think about it like that, you'd make the time. Yes?
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Y'all worked me hard tonight.
Thank you for those encouraging words. I needed that.
Agreed.
Agreed. My sentiments are the same.
All right, so I will see you guys next week. Any questions, drop it in the chat, and we go. We'll discuss it if there's something that needs to be discussed in the chat prior to next week's class. So that's it for me. Any questions before we sign off?
No, ma'am.
No questions.
Ma'am, no question.
All right. Have a good evening.
Have a
Likewise.
good evening.
Good evening.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
evening, good night.
Good night.
em necessidade reclamando. It's just. This is only circle. No problem now. The movement one. Yeah. No. Sen jobbar man, då sker det bra. Ja, I mean. Ja, vi ser